We have one of my very favorite people on the actual planet Earth joining us today, Monifa Bandele of Moms Rising. Welcome, Monifa.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being a powerful leader who has brought forward so many victories, including victories in uncertain times. And speaking of which, I want to talk a little bit about maternal health and what's happening with maternal health in America, which, by the way, listeners, is a disaster. Can you set the stage for our conversation about victories with where we are now in America with maternal health?
Yeah, sure. Right now, we're really working to preserve and continue the federal investments in the maternal mortality review committees that exist, as well as supporting ongoing funding for the perinatal quality collaboratives, the pregnancy risk assessment monitoring system, the stillbirth prevention working group, and the residential treatment program for pregnant and postpartum women. These are all programs that, we've been fighting to expand and to keep. And then also, working to maintain the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline, as well as Healthy Start. All of these programs are under attack from the current administration.
And they're under attack in a time when the United States of America remains the only World Health Organization where maternal mortality or women dying in childbirth is going up, not down, and where Black women are dying in childbirth 3 to 4 times as often as white women, which is absolutely not okay. What are we seeing as the impact of the policies related to reproductive health writ large that have been put in place by Republican leadership and Donald Trump in terms of the impact on women's health in America?
Yes, especially the attacks on having access to abortion. We're seeing a huge increase in maternal mortality in states where there's strict abortion bans because a lot of pregnant patients who go in and who need life-saving interventions from doctors are being denied because those practitioners are basically afraid to violate the law in the state in order to save pregnant women. So we're seeing an increase in such deaths happening in places like Georgia and in Texas and in like many, many states where they have these really strict abortion bans. For example, Candy Miller was a young mom in Georgia who needed help while miscarrying, and doctors there delayed supporting her, which resulted in her death because they were trying to figure out if they could perform the procedure that they needed to do to save her life. So, these things are just increasing in these states where, we need more healthcare, not less. And so when we ban things like abortions, doctors leave states, labor and delivery wards close, and therefore pregnant people who are trying to give birth have to travel far. And if there's an emergency, they have to travel far. So it's kind of like a domino effect. A lot of these policies that the Trump administration is doing and what's happening to pregnant moms and especially Black and Indigenous moms.
And one of the things that we're seeing, as you said, is a lot of OBGYNs, a lot of birthing centers, a lot of reproductive health centers closing down. That is horrible. People are losing their lives because of that. They're losing their children because of that. What's also happening is the healthcare system overall is under incredible stress because Donald Trump and Republican leaders in Congress took money out of Medicaid, like hundreds of billions of dollars out of Medicaid, in order to fund human rights abuses, terrifying children, terrifying hardworking immigrants, and really creating chaos and harm through the DHS, ICE, and Border Patrol funding that's been happening in an increased way. So I'm going to say that again. They took money out of healthcare. By they, I'm going to name names. Donald Trump and Republican leaders took money out of our healthcare system, put it into human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement, And while we know that our nation needs a compassionate, secure, balanced immigration process, we don't need cuts to healthcare and we don't need cruelty. And so, what that's done is also collapsed people's ability to get access to healthcare. It's closing rural hospitals, it's closing hospitals across the country, it's causing people to have an increase in their healthcare premiums. So, instead of increasing and helping people, including moms, get access to healthcare, the Trump administration and Republicans have completely undermined it across a number of measures, everything from access to reproductive healthcare to just access to plain old healthcare. And what are your thoughts on that? I'm so mad about it.
Yeah, it's really infuriating. We see that ICE is doing so many atrocities all over the country. And in fact, just yesterday in Savannah, Georgia, a teacher who's a beloved Black teacher in Savannah, Georgia, was killed by ICE, Dr. Linda Davis, um, because someone was fleeing in a high-speed car chase and they crashed into her. And so we see that not only is the administration's policies and their immigration policies and ICE pulling money away from life-saving things like money for healthcare, they're also putting that money into a agency that is causing enormous harm all over the country, incarcerating folks, separating families, but also causing these tragic deaths. So I think it's really important to name that, the resources are being pulled out where we need care, and they're putting into systems causing harm.
Systems causing harm, hiring untrained people who are masked. They don't even have badge numbers. There's nothing. It's like violating the Constitution all over the place. And that is not okay, people. We do not need people's human rights, the Constitution, all of our rights being violated. It's awful. And the ripple effects are also awful. What can people do, Monifa?
Definitely be organized, be engaged, join Moms Rising. We have an upcoming mass member community call, a community meeting next week, Thursday. Definitely join on here what folks are doing around everything from what's happening with DHS and ICE, all the way to what's happening with our healthcare and maternal health care, especially. And there's so many ways that you can get involved. You can share your story. You can share the story of your loved ones. You can show up and be a part of local activations. You can go to Washington, D.C. And if you live in Washington, D.C., we have a Mom Ambassador program. And you can also join a lot of the turnout that Moms Rising has been a part of. Particularly next month, there's going to be another No Kings Day on March 28th. So there's everything from signing our petitions to sharing your stories, to coming to local events, to going to national events, to turning out for the next No Kings.
Absolutely. Okay, so what is bringing you hope, even though this disaster is happening across the country?
Yeah, I think that watching all of the people who are activated, people are so engaged. The turnout, not only to mobilizations, but also to mutual aid efforts, to town halls, to accountability sessions with local Congress people, all of those things, we're seeing like more and more people getting involved, more people resisting ICE and pushing back on this occupation that's happening in their cities. And so definitely the engagement of folks give me hope. And I also am getting a lot of hope from elected leaders who are charting a different path, everywhere from Baltimore, Maryland to Chicago, Illinois, to right here in my own city, New York City. We're seeing local elected leaders push back on the Trump administration, push back on having DHS in their streets, but also doing things like canceling medical debt. Come on, Illinois, also doing things like pushing for and winning finally in New York State universal child care. This is what happens when we put the right elected leaders in the right places. So this election coming up, the midterms, are very important, but also in between that, for folks out there, are a lot of your local elections. We've got to keep our foot on the gas with the local, what's happening in cities and states, because that's where a lot of the inspiration is happening right now.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned the inspiration is happening in cities and states. And that's an area where we can definitely move forward progressive, positive policy that lifts families, lifts people, lifts the economy. And we're seeing that happening. And I'm so glad you raised that, Monifa. I'm also glad you raised making a plan to vote. Do you want to give people advice on that? Because we've got some voting situations coming up.
I know. I mean, I hope a lot of people have seen the clips online of the hundreds of students at North Carolina A&T. In that state, in North Carolina, their polling site on campus was attacked by the state legislature and closed. And we know that most students do not have cars. They are not able to travel far and get back to campus and get to class. And so they demonstrated just how horrible closing their polling site was by marching from their campus to the nearest polling site, right? They had to basically cross counties to go, and the students are fired up. They also went to the state capitol to speak out and testify about how much they, as young people, are eager to vote in the midterm elections, and they're very upset at the administration for making that so much more difficult for them and their classmates by closing their polling site. So we see a lot of shenanigans happening all over the country where sites there where there's a lot of young people, like college campuses, or where there's a high portion of Black folks, like some of the communities in Alabama, where they're like closing polling sites. On top of that, there's ID laws that are rolling out and that are very confusing. And then there's also an effort to make it even more difficult. Folks should check out the SAVE Act to vote because of the identification qualifications. So definitely make a plan, because there are forces throwing everything in the road for you to vote. But we know folks are going to turn out in huge numbers. I mean, they really kind of awakened this college campus, by closing their polling site, because they got the students riled up to where hundreds of them marched a county over to be able to early vote.
So important. So everybody, make sure you're registered to vote. Check your voter registration and then make a plan to vote. And also start picking your voting walk-up song. Start figuring out who you're going to go vote with. Start figuring out, maybe you want a party to select who you're going to vote for on the ballot with some other people. A party can be you and your cat, or it could be you and a whole bunch of people. It is really important now more than ever that we each exercise our right to vote, because we're seeing breaches of the U.S. Constitution, breaches of human rights, breaches of democracy. And guess what? It is each of us, together with our friends, families, and neighbors, who are going to be able to protect our democracy and build toward that more perfect union and help make the dream of what we can be together as a nation be a reality in a place where everyone, I mean everyone, can thrive. So thank you so much for being on, Monifa. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your leadership.
Thanks for having me on. Bye.